Welcome to the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast. I'm Sarah.
I'm Trish.
And this is our podcast. We talk about wrestling news and various topics from different promotions, primarily AEW, but also New Japan Pro Wrestling, WWE, and topics from around the wrestling world. Whatever we find interesting, and we hope you will too. We are a proud member of the Social Suplex Podcast Network, and you can find our content on our podcast feed, the Social Suplex Podcast feed, as well as on Twitter and YouTube. Please feel free to like, subscribe, and rate our podcast. Today is Monday, May 27, 2024. Happy Memorial Day to those of you who celebrate. And Trish and I are going to kick the show off. We've got a lot to talk about today, friends, so we are going to try and cram a lot of things in here. But we are going to kick things off with our reactions to the Double or Nothing pay-per-view last night, which took place in Las Vegas, Nevada, and saw a ton of absolute insanity all over the place, including a man being set on fire, which we saw it coming, and we were pretty excited when it happened. Trish, I liked this pay-per-view. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a little long. I don't think anybody would disagree with it. But I thought there were some matches that were better for me than others. But for the most part, I thought it was maybe not the best, maybe not at the top level of top AEW pay-per-views, but kind of a level under that. And certainly the most enjoyable Double or Nothing for me since Double or Nothing 2021. I think it blows 23 and 22 out of the water in terms of overall quality of the show. What do you think about it, Trish?
Just steal stuff out of my head, I swear.
Womp womp.
No, I agreed with, I did think it was the best Double or Nothing since 2021. Last year was kind of saved by the top two matches. The year before had that awful middle.
Yeah.
Especially with the Owen matches in the middle, which were just dire.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, it actually felt quite a lot like 2021. So, they started quite hot, and then you had kind of a longish middle that dragged a little bit.
Yep.
And then the top part of the card delivered, and that was very much similar to that. I think the one difference, though, in 2021 actually Double or Nothing had a bit of this, because I think about the three-way, the Orange Cassidy Pac and Kenny Omega match was, I would have liked a little bit less interference.
Yeah.
It's because you had a lot of big things going on in this show.
Yes.
You had new champions, TBS champion, IC champion. You had the return of Maxwell Jacob Freeman. You had the return of Juice Robinson. You had a heel turn with Chris Statlander. You had fire. You had a man hung upside down for like 10 minutes being super kicked by shoes. You had so much going on that I felt like if you could cut back on some of that other stuff, everything else would be more impactful and it not feel like... Sometimes, these shows feel like they're 100 miles an hour, which is good because they pass quickly.
Yes.
At times. But sometimes when you do that kind of constant interfering, that breakdown, you don't get that kind of... what's the feeling? It's just that rewarding feeling that kind of takes you into that next match. So it kind of just, that can create like a bit of a lull. So yeah, I would have liked to see the interference cut down. It kind of reminded me of, I know Josh mentioned it to us earlier in the group chat, to Revolution 2021.
Yeah.
And that very much was a similar complaint around that time. They had so many things going on, so many stories interlapping. It just kind of needed kind of evening out. And I guess some of that is, they try to protect too many people. So you just have to beat people. But in terms of... Yeah, it's okay. Like we just need to beat people, and that as we have more people coming back, that's going to become more of a kind of constant to kind of watch. But yeah, I thought it was an enjoyable show. I think it flowed quite well. I think it flowed way better than last year, actually.
Yeah.
Of course, we didn't have the amazing Chris Jericho Adam Cole match in the middle of this year. So.
Ouch. I was definitely shocked a little bit that, I watched the pay-per-view. We talked about it in our group chat that the sense seemed to be this was decent. And then I got online and some people were real mad. And I was really surprised by that. And then people were real mad that people were mad. But I was sort of surprised by that because, like you said, you can definitely argue about the interferences. They got to me in Swerve versus Christian. At that point, I think the cumulativeness of it, I was like, okay, we could have had again, it was executed beautifully, but we could have had 70% less of it, and I feel like the impact would have still been fine. But,
yes.
That's a complaint that you said we've had since 2021. It's not like interference finishes are anything new in AEW. So I was kind of surprised that, I don't know, there were some reactions from people whose opinions I very much respect that I was kind of surprised by. Overall, I thought the show was good. I thought there were some weird story moments. I thought Mercedes Moné did a fantastic job. I thought her match with Willow, the expectations for that were incredibly high. She had an incredibly difficult bar to match, and she and Willow just went out and killed it. They both did a phenomenal job. I don't think the match was perfect, but I mean, it's wrestling. It's never going to be. But I thought she did a great job. I thought she looked really good. There were so many expectations, and, I feel like this was where, like, on Friday night, Dave Meltzer was like, well, she has to have the greatest match of her life and drag Willow to the greatest match of her life. And I was like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that's overdoing it a little bit. There was a lot of expectation on it, but where she was always going to excel was in the ring.
Yes.
She is a phenomenal in-ring. She always has been a great in-ring wrestler.
Yeah.
And that has always been kind of where she's gained her following, as opposed to someone like Becky, who she was always kind of up against. She was much more of a talker. Right. So the key thing was getting her in the ring. I thought it was very interesting that it was quite a mixed crowd response. I think people expected it to be much more negative towards her, and it really wasn't. Whether that translates to week, we will kind of find out. But it's, I thought it was a good night for her, and they needed it. People can argue whether she made the impact they expected her to or not, but she's still the biggest star in that division. Yeah. They still need to build that division around her. She needs to be the person that Willow chases. Ultimately, you do the Chris thing as a side, and then you come back to that. But it's hopefully that gets her more kind of settled down. She gets into more of a groove. They find kind of how to use her in that way, and that will be beneficial for everyone.
Yeah, the impact of having her in the women's division can't be understated, because clearly it was what was required to get an investment in that group. And, even last night, you had a buy-in match, but you had 3 women's matches on the card at a level that I don't think even a year ago we were coming close to, in terms of, like, the investment in the storytelling, the actual quality of the matches. Like, it's just fascinating to see. I remember when you used to have one women's feud going on an AEW show, and it was for the title, and there was nothing else. And like now
they were bringing people in for Shida to face. They didn't have anybody for Shida to face during part of the pandemic. So
no, it's like night and day now. So it's kind of nice that the investment is there. It's sad that it took this long to get it to be where it is. Frankly.
It is, but at the same time, it's not uncommon, No. And this is a star that the network are invested in, that Tony's invested in. And we saw the same with WWE, with Ronda Rousey. That's what it took for that to change. And it's unfortunate that it does take something like that, but it's kind of important that we're there now. And the show needs it, actually, at the moment. And some of the women's stories are probably some of the most coherent of all the storytelling currently. There's so much chop and changing in some of the male storylines. So, they were great. I actually thought I think that's my favourite match on the show in terms of actual wrestling.
It was very good.
I thought I had the hottest crowd as well. Yeah, for me,
consistently throughout the night.
Yes.
What did you think of? We had the return of MJF. This was
Triple H MSG 2002.
Yeah.
Yeah, jacket and all. Yes.
I think my overall thing at this point is that I am going to hold off, right? Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things we always talk about, is I don't have to have a hot take right away. Like, there were some things that made me optimistic. There were some things that made me raise an eyebrow. I think my concern is, and I think our friend Yukzura talked about this on Twitter, where she said that she wasn't sure if she would have preferred if MJF had a character progression rather than a reset. And it did very much feel like this last night was a reset rather than a progression from what he had learned. It felt very much like, I'm going to get rid of Adam Cole very quickly. We're going to write him off for a period of time, which is what last night felt like. And I'm going to tell everybody that I really didn't like what I was doing, even though it was all my idea.
Literally, yes.
Yes, literally all his idea, but he didn't like it, and he's sorry he did it. And it's just like, I'm a show don't tell person. I would have probably preferred it if this had been less promo based, but if that's an unrealistic ask with MJF, I think, because that's kind of who he is and what his strengths are as a wrestler. But I am kind of in wait and see mode. I'm not sure that what he was going for last night worked. And as always with MJF, like, cut it by 30% and it would have been more impactful. But what did you think of this, Trish?
He's definitely trying to play. It's very funny, actually. He's playing like Triple H early 2002 in his promos as well. So it wasn't just the jacket. If you'd said ass kicker, I would have actually laughed my head off. But he very much is playing that character. Yeah, it's definitely wait and see. So he's going to be the anti-hero, which is good because he's not going to be heel. Not right now. Everyone wants him to be heel. That's great, but that's not what he's going to be. And we're going into Forbidden Door, which is in Long Island.
Right.
So you can't do that. I do wonder if, I mean, we talked about it a few weeks ago, if Joe was being kind of left for him.
Yeah.
If that was a setup, because they've just been kind of keeping him ticking over, but without any real kind of destination or any kind of movement. So just kind of been a side piece in the Hook Jericho stuff. So that would probably be an easy thing to do. You know, there's no one really in New Japan that you want to do anything with him at the moment. You know, you want to get him that big hometown thing under his belt. He is going to be the hottest babyface on the show for a little while, you know, and we've had all this talk, haven't we, for months and months, for the last few months about, you know, people going Osprey or Swerve or all this stuff, but you get returns, and returns always peak, and there is an element of me that wonders. So everyone goes on about who should be the next guy, or who should be this and who should be that, but we've got some kind of key people returning who are current, who really are the people carrying these numbers, who will be the people carrying these numbers. So you'll have Max. You know, we should get Paige back very shortly. You know, hopefully at some point we get Kenny Omega back. At some point after that, you know, Jon Moxley, well, maybe hopefully before that, Jon Moxley is back full-time with AEW. So you've got these people that are carrying the numbers, and yet a lot of people kind of want them kind of pushed to one side, and I don't think that works. I think you really have to integrate them, and you have to run with them as well, because I don't think the audience have given up on their current people yet to be looking just for everything new. So that's going to be an interesting balance as we go forward, especially for Max, who can be quite, is it dominating the word of the show?
Yeah.
He can, yeah. So is he able to kind of restrain that and restrain his material to be part of that kind of team pushing forward? Or does he just want to be the number one guy? And how does that work with this kind of new ecosystem and all the other things that are in place? So that's going to be really interesting going forward. And we probably should have seen it coming. You know, there was Tony did his press call on Thursday, and nobody picked up. It was amazing, actually. There were so many aggregators, and not one person picked up on him saying, you know, the people that have carried us and kept us strong during this period. He said there'll be great opponents walking through the door for them soon. And nobody even, like, how did nobody come on that? It's crazy. But it is a point, because there have been people in holding patterns. And I think we can feel that. You know, we talked about it, and we'll talk about Swerve momentarily. We might as well talk about him now, fuck it, because we've just started it. Just started it, right? But there is that thing of when we looked at it and was like, Christian's the best option, and he was the only heel available, and he was the only person really available. But they're now going to have more options for different people. And that is important going forward. Him being on the kind of anti-hero face side has to happen. He can't come back as a heel, but it does still leave the kind of the big heel vacancies.
Right.
And Swerve. What did you think of the Swerve Christian match?
I thought it was good. I don't know. When thinking about the show overall, I don't think that either the build or the show itself was as good as Revolution. I thought the build to Double or Nothing was much better than the build to Dynasty. I don't know if I thought that Double or Nothing was as good as Dynasty as a show by itself, but I also wonder if some of that isn't because the build was so shitty that I was shocked by how much I enjoyed Dynasty, right? It becomes one of those weird chicken and an egg thing, right? I thought that Swerve and Christian was very good. I like Swerve a lot. I don't know if it was as good as the build was for it. I think that, you know, some of this I'm definitely impacted by the fact that it was a long show. It was the very end of the night, and the interference was starting to get to me at that point, where I was like, okay, like, cut this just a little bit back. But I thought overall, like, you know, Swerve is hot, and, you know, people saying it's not working. Like, this is happening a lot. And I mean, we'll probably get into this at another point, but I'm sort of frustrated by the complaints and the difficulty with people saying, well, this isn't working. And there's no metric by which they explain it is not working, right? We've seen this in a couple places. The Elite storyline is not working. The Swerve stuff isn't working. Swerve feels like a mid-carder. Why? Like, what is it about? Can you, like, I get frustrated when I'm like, if you can't articulate exactly what it is about this that makes it, you know, this feels like this to me, then is that objectively a criticism, or is that a subjective criticism about what you're experiencing? So, you know, I did not feel like Swerve felt like a mid-carder. I don't think that Swerve is having necessarily the amount of focus. They are working as desperately hard as they can right now to put focus on Swerve, and everything that I was worried about, and I know you and I talked about this, was going to be Hangman 2.0, right? So far, that has not necessarily happened. I can feel the show and the promotion doing its best to make Swerve a focus, but so much is happening, and he's not getting the benefit of the MJF era when, like, MJF was the only thing on the show, that, you know, there's other shit happening, and it just feels sometimes like he is a little bit lost at times, but I don't know that that's anything that he's specifically doing or not doing. And I like everything he's doing, but I don't know if the match stood out to me in such a way that I was like, it was definitely one of my favorite matches on the show, but I don't know if it was the thing I remember, I guess would be the best way to describe it. I just blathered, Trish.
No, because it brings up some interesting points. So for me, it kind of highlighted what I would say what most people's issues are, but they don't really kind of articulate it. So they are protecting him, and I know Skyto on Twitter asked us to kind of go through how and when. So we talked about this at the very beginning. He needed to be in 1, 4, and 5. And the reason we say that is, one, you get the benefit of the lead-in. That will kind of come back as the summer progresses now that we've kind of got some of the big sports or entertainment shows out of the way. 4 and 5 are actually the biggest quarters in the summer. So there's a reversal when you get from when the clocks change. What do you call it? We call it
Daylight
British.
savings.
Daylight savings, thank you. I was going to use my British terms. I didn't think you want that. So when you get daylight savings time, the audience moves slightly in terms of where they watch from. So the big quarters are 4 and 5, which is why MJF lived in them for the whole of last summer with Adam Cole. So they are protecting him in that way. We they've got the little gimmick, the clock thing that they did the last few weeks that we noticed. And, they used the NBA lead-in on the first Collision to do his first promo. That had an audience of 1.35 million, 0.49 a demo, which will be the biggest audience that anything in AEW will do this year. So they have done those kind of things with him. But the big thing for me is like, so you've done this show. And he is story number 4, 5 on it. So what you got? Mercedes winning the belt, Ospreay winning the belt, Max being back, obviously, is story number 1. What else we got? Anarchy, I guess, with the elite stuff. So you kind of find him a little bit down the card in terms of what is memorable from this show. Right. And this is the second show now since, his winning the title. If that would have been the top thing on the last show, it really helped him carry momentum into this one.
Right.
In a way that Paige was able to carry more momentum through without these complaints kind of getting bigger until the new year. And they haven't been able to give him yet anything memorable.
Right.
And I think that's the thing. So I like that he's getting some time to kind of figure out the babyface stuff.
Yes.
Because it's not easy. It's not easy, being your first kind of world championship as well. That's not easy to do. And it's good that he gets time with, a pro like Christian to kind of work on that stuff. They separated him from Mogul Embassy. That needed doing. Nana's back with him, and I think you can see the value of when you get that far into a pay-per-view and the crowd gets tired. It's great having Nana to kind of lift everything up.
Yes.
I thought that was very good. And I like the story of kind of paying for your sins, paying for all these things you did to get to the point that you did. However, it kind of does feel like it's speed running at like a really fast pace.
Yes.
And so you've got to be careful with that. So obviously the last one of that should be Adam Page. And, you shouldn't be burning that in like a couple of weeks or anything like that. That needs to be a longer program when you get round to it, whenever. Whether you're going to do that for All In or whether you're going to do that for somewhere else or what. But you've got to be really careful about you do that. But yeah, he needs something memorable. And it's the concern is that people will judge this on, I think Paige actually said it when he was interviewed after his title reign. He said, "What did you learn?" He said, "I need to be the most important thing on the show as champion." So it's very much difficult to do that if you have Max coming back in and doing stuff with like Cole later in the summer or doing stuff with Ospreay or whatever. So you have to have top guys for him to work with now. There's no excuse. And it's difficult with Forbidden Door because who is that going to be that's going to be bigger than whatever Jon Moxley's doing? Right. What's going to be bigger than what MJF's doing in his home kind of arena? Right. So that's what you're kind of battling against. So, and there isn't these big New Japan names available to him. No. So it's, I think it's pretty key that they get him involved with this elite stuff now. I did think that was a missing angle, but oh my God, there were so many angles last night that it probably made no sense to either bring Paige back or to run the elite Swerve kind of close angle or whatever. So I can get that, but at the same time, it meant that when you think of this show, nobody's going to remember the world champion as anything kind of massive on it.
No.
And that is what people are thinking out, because it's the old school mentality. It's that mentality of, the champion draws the house.
Yep.
That's what it is. That's where it comes from. And that's where you're going to get these complaints from. And then it's about, unfortunately, it's about how WWE present people as well.
Right.
And people are used to, in WWE, seeing a dominant champion or a focus on champion and then a champion that they don't care about. And they're able to differentiate between them. And we see that in New Japan as well. There's a difference between how they treat Naito and how they treat Sanada, for example, or Jay White versus Okada. It's all those sort of things. So you have to give him something going forward memorable, and you have to give him something important. And you can only, the gimmicks are better. It's way better than what they did with Hangman, but it's still not going to move you past that point unless you kind of give him something to sink his teeth into, because that's what he's looking for. They've just done this program and it's run 100 miles an hour through, and it was good. It did good TV ratings. It did better than the Joe program, actually, for TV.
Jeez, I wonder why.
Yeah, but it didn't. in trouble.
No, from a creative standpoint, I think that what they're doing with Swerve is great. Like, I'm really enjoying it. I'm enjoying watching it every week. I think it's some of the best stuff on the show. I feel like the way that they went from Swerve, sort of just trying to be a white meat babyface to coming out and being like, fuck that shit. I am going to be the same old asshole I always was, except this time a good guy. And like verbalizing that and telling it to the audience while also showing it to us was great. Like, I thought they did the really good job with that. I know that there are people who are like, oh, the babyface thing, blah, blah, blah. Whatever. I don't need all of that to be exactly perfect. Like, I don't need that switch to happen in one segment. I'm happy to wait for that, because I think sometimes the longer you wait for it, the better it is. And I am definitely, like I said, more optimistic than I was back in like January at how this has gone with Swerve. Like you said, they have really definitely given him a lot of opportunities. They don't seem to be.
They've set up for the elite stuff, haven't they? They made it clear again when they run the promo videos before the match as well, that Christian is there because of the elite. So he is set up to be the protagonist in that story.
Yes. And which he should be.
Yeah, absolutely. He's the right guy to be doing that. Whether you do, I think there's a ready-made match with, Jack Perry's just pinned Bryan Danielson. Do that in Chicago.
Right.
That's like an easy TV match on a period where we don't have a pay-per-view then for that huge stretch of time. And that'll tie you over to the week after when the Owen is going to get, be concluded on the 10th of July. So that gives you a long period of time then to build to All In. And that's another thing as well. It's that, I've seen some concerns about tickets for All In today. Right, they haven't sold any tickets.
Let's talk about this, because there's some fucking bullshit with this.
Right.
It's like ridiculous. Like, what? Like, just as a side note before we get into it, fucking men are going through it again. Like, every time I turn around, fucking men are going through it again. Dudes, calm down.
Like, putting Ospreay in every event you can ever think of, as good as he is, isn't going to solve everything, okay? Like, there is nothing in the numbers that suggests he is. In fact, I'd actually give you more credit if you started talking about Max. So, but you won't.
No,
but
again, I was assured repeatedly on multiple podcasts with multiple podcast hosts this week that Ospreay is the biggest and most popular babyface in AEW. He's the biggest star in AEW. No metric was provided to support these claims. It's vibes based only, and I can't stress enough how much I am enjoying Ospreay. Ospreay is great. I fucking love the guy. He makes me laugh. He makes me smile. He seems to be getting ready to be emotionally tortured, which is my jam. Like, I'm all down for it. But like, Tunnel Talk did a whole thing on everybody's special little guy, and I really recommend everybody listen to it. Like, I'll retweet it again. But like, the number of podcasters who, like, Ospreay is clearly their special little guy, and they have somewhat caught on to the fact that it does not appear that he's going to be winning a title in Wembley this year, and a few of them seem to be just freaking the fuck out about it. Like, and that's fine. Like, I'm sorry your special little guy isn't going to win, but like, what data shows that Ospreay is the biggest and most popular star in this company right now?
And what shows that he should jump anybody else?
Right.
Max is coming back. Paige is coming back. These guys, in fact, if you were going to pick the biggest possible TV match for numbers or pay-per-view this year, it's probably Adam Page and MJF. That's probably the biggest new match available.
Yes.
But when it comes to Wembley, so the number last week was at 38,737. And people were like, why haven't they sold any tickets? But it's like because the first count number was actually too high. So we found that they hold tickets back from on sales and then they kind of bleed in. So you don't always see the rate. So for example, Clash at the Castle in 2022, the first count number was 62,809 and the final count number was 62,296. They did sell some tickets between the on sale,
Right?
and when but that's how it works. So it's kind of deceptive. So they were probably close to 30,000 or under 30,000 in that on sale, and so that should give you a scope. Because the first count number we got was 33,000, so it gives you an idea of kind of how much they've sold things. But it's one of them. It will be generating more fun matches this year. It's not that first market thing of that first kind of excitement of that first kind of trip to Europe for AEW. So for Swerve, you know, he's going to main event. He's going to need more than Ospreay for star power.
Yes.
Ospreay's he doesn't have a ticket drawing record in the UK, let's be honest. You know, they did well with the Rev Pro show with Shingo, but that's pretty much it. So for getting other people in, you need a name in fact, I think you need a name and you need heat. So what I really don't want for him is to be going in there with someone and it be a program with absolutely no heat, and when they want the other guy to win more than you do. When you've had no focus,
matchup,
and when you've had no focus in these first two shows, because Forbidden Door, he's probably for attention unless you throw Hangman in there, which would be a choice. Probably too soon to run through that one as well, I would say. That would be difficult to run that straight away. So if you're going to give him, and I don't think, you're not getting Shingo, you're not getting Naito. All these guys are working Thursday morning, my time, or late Wednesday night, your time.
Dynamite made it very clear that on Wednesday in LA they are doing a gauntlet match for his Swerve's opponent at Forbidden Door. And there's a New Japan show on Thursday, like 8 hours later. So there's a bunch of people booked for that it'll be impossible to get them to show up at this gauntlet match on Wednesday.
Yeah, so you're either looking at someone from CML. Yep. There's going to be Sarah and Mystico are being teased by them for working this card on Wednesday night, which makes sense, isn't it? LA as well. They should probably if they've got Mystico, they should probably advertise Mystico.
You'd think.
But it's that thing. So whatever Moxley does on that show is going to be bigger, and whatever Max does is bigger unless he's got stars. So then when you get to Wembley, that next person has to be a star. And then they need to run with this Elite thing. Yeah, it was good that Elite went over clean as well. I thought that was really good. And Jack getting the pin on Danielson, which is Danielson continues to kind of be the put-over guy this year. And if he's on his way out, then it makes sense. Maybe you can do something late, big in Tacoma, but if you sign his contract by then, signed out to the end of August. But I thought it was very good that they went over clean. And this team AEW, which was a mishmash of people from different eras that never kind of felt like representing the company more than the Elite, was kind of swiftly put away, because that was the right thing. Yeah. They weren't, Darby. Yeah, okay. So Darby's team AEW absolutely wasn't 100%. So you can play on that because you can bring him back in because he needs to be involved all the way through this process. And so that's good. FTR were too busy doing promos about he's not guilty. And the same promo that we've seen a million times about how, we do this for the fans. The promos that you get with this, and it's the same with Danielson's promos, were more targeted, but kind of miss some key content, and were still kind of very much his, a lot of his home promos, and he's still doing like the yes chants and stuff. And this is a guy that's, played down the success of most people in AEW as they come through, because he's been used in that antagonist role for Eddie Kingston, for Adam Page, that sort of thing, and for the Elite last summer. So it's kind of... But they were thrown together, and there was some thrown togetherness of it. People say... remember a month ago when people were telling us everything's been planned out for this story for 6 months?
They were?
Yeah. So, they were saying, it's been planned out for 6 months, and, this, and we were like, no... No, these people are clever, but it's not. And you can really see how things have kind of been thrown together, the way that Danielson kind of got thrown in there, and that kind of disrupted the Ospreay story, because now he's, still kind of more mortified over a move that a guy returned on 3 weeks later. Right. Which is, so it's kind of messed with a load of other things, but they needed to do it, and they got that kind of out of the way. You give the Elite the kind of big win, and then they need to kind of continue their pursuit of power. My big kind of question for you is how far does this go? How far does this authority thing go? How far does it involve the belt?
I mean, I feel like they should continue to push it. I get that it's not everybody's favorite thing. I think it's working well. I think it's the numbers, it's working well. I think it's generating a giant chunk of heat. And I think with different opponents, they could probably do a lot more with it. I am more interested in them taking it further than I am in them dropping it, to be completely honest with you. Set up some weird fucked up shit, but I would rather see them do more stuff with it in the ring rather than like as a backstage type stuff. Like I don't necessarily want to see the Young Bucks screwing over other people in singles matches unless they are involved. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, no. It's interesting because there was a few things on it. It's like, I don't want to see Tony Khan as a character at all.
No.
I think you need to move away from that. And the idea of just kind of it being used as a vehicle to kind of babyface him kind of just not
it doesn't sit right.
That. No, it doesn't. And so I'd like to move away from that. The big thing that kept sitting in my head was that every time one of these angles has been kind of successful, it's involved kind of the world title and having somebody chase it.
Yeah.
And I couldn't, you get control of the world title, whether it's the NWO, whether it's the Austin McMahon stuff with The Rock as the corporate champion in 98, whether it's Danielson or Daniel Bryan chasing the Authority. And that's kind of an interesting one because you're like, okay, so one, who would you run with in that spot? But then would they do it? You could do something. Somebody said, Sixpack, our friend on the board, sent me a message saying, you could do Okada in a triple threat with Swerve and Tanahashi, who has a win over Swerve, a Forbidden Door, and then he could chase. Yep. Yeah, you could chase Okada through to All In, and I quite like the idea because it's that thing of it sounds like it's hurting Swerve, but actually the reason you do it is to give your babyface that extra chase, right? So they turn from heel to face. And then they win, they get up to a point, and then they have that setback, and it's what we talked about previously. And then they have to chase again to get that kind of second thing. And that's that thing. It's the same thing they do with Naito in New Japan. You just put them back on the chase, because they're always better on the chase. But it's so controversial to do, and especially when it's your first black world champion, male world champion. It would be really, really difficult to do. But I get the idea of it because you're trying to give him momentum going up against this authority gimmick. And then also the fact that you've got all these other kind of rising baby faces who are always going to carry more momentum than a babyface world champion is because you are at the top. You have that thing.
Yes.
People aren't watching to see you rise because you're there already. So it's so much, much more tougher. And that's the reason to do that. Maybe I'd switch him out for Hangman. I would. Absolutely. Because that's a ratings guy. And that would help Swerve to be in there with someone who's a proven ratings guy and who can help him promo-wise as well. But I can see the reason for the idea. Do I think they're going to go that way? No. I want them to do more than just kind of go to blood and guts and be over with. And it kind of just to be an angle to tie people over to people come back. And if you're going to do this, commit to it. It's good. And the people that say that it isn't good, they're only behind, believe it or not, this is good. They're only behind Chris Jericho since February for if you want to play up and down ratings or ratings impact. People don't like that, do they? It's like, who's the top ratings draws? I've left Paige out because he's not around, but in the last kind of out of the top guys, and it's like, oh yeah, it's Jericho. In fact, we got asked what were some of the top segments from the last. This is good. You'll like this. From the last period, the kind of best performing segments were quarter 5 on the 24th of the 4th, which was Jericho live promo. It also contained a full ad break. So what came after is what did the quarter rating. That was up 14% in the demo. And then on the same show, the Elite Jack Perry angle, no ad break, obviously, but did have a picture-in-picture and crossover. Next one was Jericho and Shibata Elite promo. 14% difference from what it should do, 12% in the demo. And then the joint biggest segments for the last month were the Kenny Omega promo, which, if we split it down and use weighted averages, was 16% up in the demo for them last 11 minutes. And the Copeland O'Reilly overrun on Collision, which was up 16%. And the big thing about them two was they were used to tie off onto Rampage.
Yep.
So there is an absolute strategy of when they're trying to go for these 3 hours somewhere. There's a 3 hour block coming. Absolutely. On this TV deal, there is a 3-hour block coming because every time they've had that opportunity to do them 3 hours, especially with Dynamite, they've put the biggest thing possible they can do.
Yeah.
And we've seen it a little bit with Collision. We had the FTR, Garcia with the Bucks and Okada match. We've had Kyle O'Reilly and Adam Copeland. We've had Adam Copeland and Christian Cage. And then we had the Kenny Omega segment, Omega being brought back in because they need star power. And they know they needed star power. Right. I think there's this misconception that they're just happy with how everything was going and, they're not worried about the ratings or they aren't looking to, fix things. And sometimes it's just like, it's much more simple than people think in terms of what they know they need. But it's not always something that you can just change just like that. So they knew they needed stars to come back in. Do I think that... We can probably get into the 18 to 34 stuff, actually, now I started on this. But do I think that they thought that the new signings would have a bigger impact to tie them over? Yes. Yeah, I do.
Of course.
And that didn't happen. And, we said the only one that really had a huge possibility of making, like, a massive difference to the start was Mercedes.
Right. And she hasn't wrestled.
No, she hasn't wrestled. And it just, she's come in and she can do numbers that a lot of their male kind of main event counterparts can do. And that's great because there's no one else that can do that in that division. So it's a success, but it maybe wasn't a success they thought it was going to be. I know when it came to Okada and Ospreay, they're great wrestlers, but we said this before, we meant this in the nicest way, they're not Kenny Omega.
No.
And that was always going to be a thing that, how the kind of the internet community and people that are really familiar with New Japan view Ospreay and Okada was never going to be matched with TV numbers or even ticket sales. We've not really seen much difference on that. But
well, this is what gets you frustrated with a lot of the ratings talk or the booking talk, or they should do this or they should do that, or this is how they should get out of this hole, and so much of it is built on people's personal preferences and what they want to see, which, please, we are like... We're not immune to that, but so much of it is based on personal preferences rather than actual ratings data or the reality of the pay-per-view cycle, right? They should do this, they should do that. Okay, well, that's fine, but you understand they have a pay-per-view in 3 weeks and Swerve has to have a match, right? So who should he be facing other than Christian? Okay, well, he should face Jack Perry. Okay, you want to burn that, 5 weeks after Swerve wins the title? You want to go for that already? Does that, that's cool, and I kind of get it, but, there's drawbacks to it, and I think that's one of the things that, sometimes with the fantasy booking and the people that are like, oh, we're going to fix this, there's no concept of ratings, there's no concept of, what the negative consequences are of that, because we've seen that happen over and over again. We saw that with Punk, and we saw that with a lot of the WWE people in 2022. You brought these new people in, you put them over your existing established stars, and you drove off a chunk of your audience. You did. So there's a risk to that. It does seem like they've learned from some of that currently. They're taking it a little bit slower. The way they executed the Mercedes win was a lot better than the way they executed Punk versus Hangman, right? Mm-hmm. They set her up as a heel. They set up an angle around it. You weren't supposed to cheer for her. The fact that there were people yesterday that were like, oh, they had to pivot to a Mercedes heel turn. No, they were doing that the whole time, you guys. I'm sorry you didn't recognize that, or I'm sorry that there was a pattern there that you thought you were seeing. That was the plan. And I just feel like that's, look, everybody's biased. Everybody's biased to their own personal shit, right? Mm-hmm. And you and I are certainly not immune to that. And I think we try to be as open and honest as possible. And also realistically, you're listening to this, you're biased to our shit too, because you're taking valuable time out of your day to listen to us instead of listening to somebody who's saying something different, right? Hopefully because you like us, but probably because and wrestling is a hobby that we're all doing. It's not our jobs. We're not doing this because we're getting paid for it. So you want to listen to the people who you agree with because probably makes you feel good. We get that. But I think Trish and I have always tried really hard never to use the numbers to tell you what you should like, right? You like whatever the fuck you want. You don't like Jericho, that's fine. I support that fully. But don't ask us, we've been telling you why he's on TV. Don't ask why he's on TV. Don't say he has to retire immediately, because understand that if he does, he's taking a chunk of your audience with him.
He's the biggest TV draw right now.
Right.
Whether you like it or not. And you probably don't. He is still the biggest TV draw right now and has been over the last, 2 periods.
Right.
So it's just one of them things. So they have to integrate him because, as I said, the current people that draw the numbers are not the new people you might be invested in.
Right.
And that's the kind of the constant battle. And it's funny, isn't it? Because this whole discussion on 18 to 34 in the last several weeks, it started on March 27th. Not in November, it started in March 27th.
Well, let's back into this a little bit, because I want to make sure that people who aren't as deeply tied in as you and I are aware of this, right?
Aren't as insane about numbers as I am.
We really like numbers. So essentially, a lot of this came out of last Friday's Wrestling Observer newsletter, okay? And a couple of audio segments that Dave Meltzer has done over the last week or 10 days, right? Dave has been under the impression Dave has looked at the 18 to 34 numbers, and he is shocked and appalled at how many 18 to 34 people are no longer watching AEW. His original perspective on this on the board was that this had started in November. He got kind of some other information on this. He got a little bit corrected on this, and he changed it. And as Trish noted, he has been accurately pointing out now that the loss in 18 to 34 started on March 27th. I'm throwing it back to you.
Yeah, cheers. No, see, there was this thing, and what it comes down to for me is that, yeah, it's not great that they took such a hit in male 18 to 34 in general, or 1834 in general. However, it's not like it's the first time they've ever taken a hit in any demos. So we've got quite a number of different things that are impacting this. So first of all, you've got competition. So starting on the 28th for the second was Survivor. And that is a show that is touting this year as its biggest year since 2021 in 18 to 34 and in 18 to 49.
Right.
So they are taking a chunk. And we've seen shows do that before, like The Challenge.
Yes.
Challenge in 2021 had people thinking that Kenny Omega was hated by young women, if you remember, and his title reign should end. And it's very funny because then the Challenge finished, NXT moved to Tuesday nights, and all of a sudden they were doing humongous ratings. Nothing about the show changed. Nothing. But it just shows you how competition can have that impact. So you look at something differently, like it's failing, and yet it's just that the competition is there. And, there's been other examples of it. So November 2021 into December 2021. So you had Full Gear, and you had Hangman's title win, and then Kenny was away, Moxley was out. They had horrendous competition from basketball and a lot of the fall kind of dramas and TV shows. And what happened was they got to the 15th, so Hangman and Danielson had their Iron Man match. Not Iron Man match, Hour match, sorry.
Hour long, yeah.
How dare I get Hangman Law wrong? What is going on? And, and then the following week, the competition dries up. There's a lot of buzz off that match, and it rises up, but the 18 to 34 number doesn't. And that doesn't actually recover and jump up until they have the TBS debut. So, and you had to think about that there. That's a period of time where it's MJF versus CM Punk, and everyone's talking about it like it's the biggest thing in the world, and yet the 18 to 34 number doesn't care.
No.
And it's dropped massively from that period of time before. So it's one of those things where it's the 18 to 34 is much more circumvent to a hot program, stars, returns,
Gimmicks,
absolutely gimmicks, and big matches. Okay, and if you think about it, so since the 27th, so when we came out of Revolution, you don't have Kenny Omega, you don't have MJF, you don't have Darby Allin after a week, you don't have Adam Page. I'm missing some, I'm sure. But it's like you lose. I'm definitely missing one more. That's going to bug me. Oh, you don't have Sting anymore. Let's have one. That's a good one. So Mox. Oh, God, yeah. Mox is in and out, and kind of gets rushed back, kind of feels like the TV. So you are missing 6 of your stars. And then you have debut, a card of the first week. You have a debut Mercedes Moné in the second week. And you have the Adam Copeland, Christian Cage blow-off match in the third week. Then you don't have anything. And we've not seen huge TV matches in the last few months. We've not seen it. They haven't needed to do it because they've changed the structure and the way they're operating because of the pay-per-views. So with that addition of Dynasty, you're not getting that TV stuff in the middle. And there might be a reason to hold that, is that you hold it to the end of the competition, which we're now approaching now, and all of a sudden, oh look, MJF's back. Soon we'll have Page back. Oh, you've got the Owen coming up, which should hopefully involve, star versus star matches with, God forbid, clean finishes. Jesus Christ. Please fix that. Like, people just have to lose. But you have these things coming up which should involve big TV matches. You know, we should have some sort of version of Blood and Guts. There should be some title defenses for Swerve between Forbidden Door and All In. So you're going to get those kind of big matches back. You get them returns back. You know, we should see a lift in a number if there's no NBA, you know. By the time you guys listen to it, you'll know if there's a Game 5 for Boston Celtics. We don't know. We're not working in the future. I guess they will. You know, they've been flattening everybody. That's the extent of my basketball knowledge. Don't ask me any more questions. But but you'll see a lift in from that number anyway, just because of that for the returns. We saw it with female 1834 last week. With, you know, Derby comes back and it's out. It's nothing to do with Derby, but that additional interest in any one of these demos we're interested to will lift it. And it's very funny that kind of the elite story has been blamed for 18 to 34 male, and yet was that segment at the end was the strongest on the show for 18 to 34 male. You work it out. I don't know. I think we're very quick to run to what things could be when actually we need to kind of settle it down and have a look and see how it edges out. And it doesn't mean that it recovers straight away. It doesn't mean that these things jump up. You know, it's a demo that isn't as loyal and will bounce around to whatever it's kind of interested in. But it doesn't mean they've completely lost sight of everything in AEW, or nothing's ever working, or nothing's ever going to work again. And you can just treat them in with a gimmick. We've seen it a million times. You know, whether it was the footage, whether it was the Joe Hook stuff, you know, Vikingo and Omega
Kenny.
with Kenny was a quick one last year. And it's one of those things where also, you know, they outperformed actually at the start of the year. You know, they were up in 18 to 34, 10% in January and 3% in February. And that's before you take out loss of homes. So they were actually up big time on the year before. So the programs that went into Revolution were working. Revolution, by the way, was not just some pay-per-view that people just turned up for because Sting was retiring.
Right.
People bought into the build. They bought into the build for the Sting, Darby, and the Bucks match, which was probably, I think that might be the best short executed program in quite some time. It actually had like everything worked from beginning to end and no kind of unsatisfactory ending, I would say. And then, you know, they bought into the Hangman Swerve stuff with Joe in the background as well. Both of them deliver good numbers. So it's to say that, like, oh, you know, it's just a drop from where it was before. No, those were hotter stories than what we've had in the last few months. They just were. So you're going to get that. So you lost all these people straight after Revolution. You lose two hot stories. You know what? When that happens for WrestleMania every year and then numbers go down, does anyone ever look at it as like this complete disaster? Or does people just say it's the pattern because it's WrestleMania?
Oh, I've been told several times it's the pattern just because it's WrestleMania. I've been like, hey, you know, it seems like there's some warning signs for WWE right now. Here's a couple. And again, some signs doesn't mean it's going to happen, but there's some things right there right now make questionable. Nope, that's just the traditional quarter drop after WrestleMania. Oh, okay. Well, okay. That's fine.
So does AEW have a pattern?
I'm going to say yes.
Okay. So you do have periods of time in a year where you're going to struggle against competition, right? So you have March Madness. You know that that's going to come up. You have a drop just in the summer of people watching traditionally kind of through June, early July. They come back in August and September. And we've seen that. You know, we see that in 2020. If you look at the numbers there, you'll see it in 2022. That's just your standard kind of pickup, and same last year. What you do get some, and then you've got your fall kind of TV kicking in at the end of September and mid-October into your hockey and your basketball, and then that kind of peaks out at the end of the year. So we do see those kind of traditional trends, but in terms of their trend, it's actually very different because things keep changing that impact that. So this Revolution number, you have a big pay-per-view at the start of your year. You built that up. That's like a secondary pay-per-view. These pay-per-views aren't all the same now. They don't all live on the same kind of platform. There's not the same different distance between them. There's not the same differences. They're all different. So to judge them kind of like for like sometimes is incredibly difficult. Like this Double or Nothing number. You know, we've had 2 pay-per-views in this cycle. In the previous times, we've had 1 pay-per-view in this cycle.
Right.
So it's and then you've got something like All In, which is delivering you know, that's kind of, if you're treating it as like your big show, your Tokyo Dome, your WrestleMania, whatever you want to call it. So you are changing the way that the year is constructed. So we are now building towards All In.
Yes.
In a way that we wouldn't have been. We've been building towards All Out, but with much normal build and more things kind of in between in the summer. And it keeps changing like that. NXT did it as well. You look at NXT, where did their big peak come in? Last summer, in June. Funny enough, straight after the playoffs. It's not hard, this, is it? And, you know, they brought in stars, they did big matches in that summer, and they used all that kind of extra appeal to then keep that audience and momentum and sign their TV deal. I don't think it's any secret why they're really targeting June, July this year. It makes absolute sense. But there's this expectation if they're going to carry these numbers year on year in the same cycle, in the same sequence. But we've got different pay-per-views coming here, there, and everywhere. We're changing the way that TV works. We've added collision.
Yes.
So it's harder to judge on those ways. Yes. Are they less popular than they were previously? Yes. Are they less popular when they started? I don't think so. You look at the pay-per-view numbers when they started, and they're all kind of between 80, 90,000, 100,000. They'll do at least 120K on this one. They're doing more pay-per-views than ever. Revolution did 180,000. It's a different world in some ways from when they started, and I don't think they get enough credit for that. And it's the same when you look at the loss in TV. So when they are looking at a TV deal, and you're looking at where they were in 2020 when they signed the deal in January, and you look at the loss of TV, and you look at they're holding up better. And I think if they weren't compared every 5 minutes to WWE, they wouldn't be looked at as so much as something that's not doing well enough.
Well, that is the frustrating piece for me, and that was the frustrating piece about The Observer and the way that Dave wrote his article about AEW's first 5 years, right? Was, and he even said this last weekend on the audio where he talked about the 18 to 34, and then he said, I actually looked at 18 to 34 overall on television, and I was shocked at how much more it's dropping than AEW is. And that kind of made me pause because I'm like, well, wait a second. If you haven't been comparing the overall performance of 18 to 34 to AEW's 1834, then what are you basing your comparisons on? Are you basing it on their past performance, which can you do that if you're not accounting for the loss of 1834 overall? And can you do that if you're doing the comparison to WWE? Because WWE, again, I don't like the programming, but they've been really, 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 really successful. They've been the most successful thing on television that isn't sports. I don't think there's any way to downplay that. It's been an absolutely unbelievable couple of years for them. But that means that if you're saying that AEW is failing, specifically because they're not reaching a growth pattern that is unprecedented, then are you doing them a disservice? Why aren't we comparing AEW to the rest of television? And AEW's performance in comparison to the rest of television is absolutely insane. You talked about the challenge. We could talk about Vanderpump Rules. There's a host of shows that used to destroy AEW in the ratings that no longer do, right? So and I'm not, are we trying to compare two things that are not alike simply because they both are wrestling? There's an unfairness there, and I think one of the problems that happens is that it reinforces and perpetuates people's already existing unhappiness with the booking, or this isn't working for me, or I don't like this storyline, or I'm not happy with this. And so as a result, we get caught in this feedback loop where you just have people, loudly insisting that something isn't working without, again, showing the metric by which it shouldn't, which it should be evaluated by. And again, it's not working because of my subjective personal preference is a completely acceptable metric to match. I have no problem with that. If you want to say, here's why it sucks, I don't like it, base your entire podcast empire on that. I will support that. I just want you to tell me that up front. I don't want you to try to hide behind it's failing. Well, why? What's your metric for that?
And it's that thing of, so a lot of this is based around, will they get a TV deal or not? Oh. And there is this absolute kind of gloom about it. But, I'm going to tell you some things. So, obviously, one of the things that's been out lately is that the NBA, they had an exclusive window with the NBA where they were $200 million short WBD of the asking price. And that kind of fits a lot of the things we've been told about David Zaslav, and that he will kind of try to go in low at first. And, that seems to have cost him here. It was also one of the reasons we were told at the time that he was not getting WWE Raw.
Right.
Yeah. But this kind of thing around they won't get a deal is just, it's just nonsense, to be honest. And when we talk to people in the industry or people connected to WBD, it's very much that they expect them to be a priority. Especially, you've seen sports media saying that this week. And that because they want to retain their current property. So you're trying to stop any kind of cause some calm, isn't it? You don't want, if they do lose the NBA, and it looks like they are going to lose the NBA, then you need to make it that it's as less a hit as possible. And it's less of a financial hit because of what they would have been paying for the NBA is much more than the carriage fees that they would have received and the ad fees they would have received.
Yes.
So that's
more about money if
that's more about prestige and about, that kind of press relationship as well in terms of who you are as WBD, as TNT. But it's not going to really have a huge effect on AEW other than that they may speed up that retention in a way, just to kind of have that there to say, actually, we haven't got all these more uncertainties. But it's not a problem for AEW like it seems to have been perceived to be. They do want the pay-per-views on Max. I can tell you that. There has been some material produced, kind of mock-ups for advertising for pay-per-views on Max. And that would make sense because, we talk about 18 to 34, and it's kind of funny because WBD, their press releases, this was pointed out to me around Collision last year, when they put out their press releases, when they're number one ranked for 18 to 49, the demo that they always highlight is 25 to 54.
Yes.
It's not 18 to 34.
No.
So that may be more important for someone like Netflix, and that may have influenced the WWE deal. But when it comes to WBD, it's not considered the first thing they're looking for. They've been able to convert pay-per-views from their younger fan base especially, and their TV fan base into pay-per-view buyers at a much higher rate than what's kind of been expected of them. That's been an issue for, boxing is not converting into pay-per-view buyers currently, unless it's certain fights that they're really struggling. We saw the failure of the Francis Ngannou Tyson Fury fight.
Yes.
So that offers them a lot, and it might be just about what that is worth, because when you have something like WWE, they give their pay-per-view library and their pay-per-views to Peacock, they're set a set price. If you go for somewhere like Amazon Prime, for example, they use a completely different model where you maybe set a lower price and then you're given kind of compensation for how many people view each time that product. So it could be just looking at how that's modernized and how that impacts on them as part of their kind of current.
Everyone knows therapy is great for solving problems, but getting therapy has its own problems too, like finding the right therapist, fitting into their schedule, and of course, the cost. Well, BetterHelp can solve those problems. It's totally online and built around your schedule. It's surprisingly affordable too. Connect with a credentialed therapist by phone, video, or online chat, all from the comfort of your home. Visit BetterHelp.com to learn more and save 10% on your first month. That's BetterHelp, H-E-L-P.
Negotiations at the moment. But I thought Tony was very, very bullish, starting with the press call this weekend.
It was very noticeable how bullish he was, right? Between that and the Justin Barrasso Sports Illustrated article that came out on Sunday, right? It was Sunday.
Yes.
It read as though the deal is essentially agreed to in principle, and it's just a question of, crossing your I's and dotting your T's. Or it seemed as though the NBA thing being settled has, given them the opening. That's how it read. It was certainly something that more than one person remarked on.
Yeah, and it did make sense. They're in LA this week. Seems to be an interesting time to be in LA at the Forum. Probably, advertise Mystico. Get a few more people from the door before you invite those execs over. But they have a good opportunity. I think Tony said it was something we're going to celebrate on the press call as well. So they seem to not be tempering expectations on this. They seem to be kind of highlighting it and kind of making a big press on that this weekend. There was a CBS article, I think, interview with Tony Khan on a similar subject as well. So, and I think, look, you've got to say, it's not like it's not going to be this out of this world deal, okay?
No.
And WWE didn't get that, It'll probably be dressed up similarly, I think WWE at 1.3 times when we actually drilled down into it with the Netflix stuff. So, but at the end of the day, the big thing about this is security. And it's not just, you can add in that they'll be hopefully covering streaming and cable, so covering kind of both of your big kind of outlets and hopefully protecting against whichever way the business goes as it goes forward with TV. But it's one of them. It's just security, and it will stop kind of some of the silliness. It probably never will completely.
Not all of it. I mean, realistically, and we see the cycle, right? And this was what was so disturbing. Not disturbing, but somewhat vaguely annoying, right? So in the Observer this week, Dave literally wrote, "Sports media believes that the NBA not being on WBD is a good deal for AEW. But I talked to this one person, and that one person says there's no way WBD will pay for them, so they're not getting a deal." That's how it read, right? The whole of the Observer this week read like an obituary for AEW. They're not profitable.
It's daft.
They couldn't make a Braun Breaker. It was
some of these things, they don't matter, and their whole business this year is tied around this TV deal. That's why we've had the 3-hour blocks, and we've been sacrificing things that, if you look at it, like things like the Copeland match or the Kenny Omega segment, you put that in the middle of the show, those shows probably do a bigger number. That segment probably looks much better. But it doesn't matter, because what matters to them is increasing that value of that third hour. And that's why you're getting these tie-over segments quite a lot. So everything is gathered around getting this deal and not much else. And that's something that I said to people last night, you got to get that in your head. So yeah, there's going to be some speed running. There's going to be some weird stuff. There's going to be some weird returns. Because getting these people back on screen is more important right now than kind of sometimes the logic involved with it. And that's some disruption, we like some of the character stuff. And when you think about, the 5 years that AEW has kind of been in, that's been one of its strong points. It's been kind of the layout of character stories and how things develop and how they develop in kind of an unconventional way. Because when I think about some of the best storytelling, we talk about Hangman all the time. He's our Lobo. Can we do that? Everyone else should do that, right? We should have a disclaimer on every podcast we listen to, like, right, which person are you going to go insane over? We need that.
Who's your special guy? Let us know. Not so that we can discount your analysis of your special guy, but we can take into account that this is your special guy and it may be affecting how you're talking about the show.
Absolutely. But, that story and the battles with kind of depression, with alcoholism, was really special to watch on a week-by-week basis. And that was such a strong point in that long-term storytelling that we all kind of brought in, especially over the pandemic. And then you had something like even short programs like Eddie Kingston, John Moxley, with their kind of interaction, when we've done that twice over now, which have really kind of keyed in. And they're really different. And I know that that's what a lot more people kind of... That's a big criticism that people say that you want to see more of that. And it's difficult because there's so many people now that... I think there was a stat that... Thurston did, where I think it's the average wrestler in AEW's had 4 matches a year. Yes. Whereas if you go back and you look at the ones from 2019, 2020, it's dominated by the people that are at the top of the card. So the people you want to see wrestle are the people that you see wrestle, or, in front of the crowd. And that is something they've got to improve anyway. But it doesn't take away from the fact that, they have executed some of these stories. They've made stars. Have we made a Tiffany Stratton or a Bron Breakker? I think they've made more than a Tiffany Stratton and a Bron Breakker. And I get what he meant by that in terms of the top of the card being very heavy and it hurts elevation. But, they have made stars. Darby Allin's at the front of that card. He's a star. Yeah. He draws ratings. When you talk about Orange Cassidy, he leads off shows. Why does he lead off shows? Because he's one of the few people that are capable of converting that audience and making that work. There's not many. You go look. You list all the people that open more than one show a year. You won't go very far. No. He's very much capable of that, and that's great. It's not just them as well. MJF. Huge. Whether you like what he did last year or not, they had a plan with him, and he faced main eventer after main eventer after main eventer with feuds in the middle to kind of build him back up if he takes a loss as a heel. That was a carefully executed plan, and even that had a little bit of screwed up stuff with the Punk stuff, but it still managed to build him up into a ratings draw at his age. How many examples are there of that? There's not actually that many. Hangman, we talk about him too much. Yeah, fine. But you built him now, he's up into a ratings draw. You've got a guy like John Moxley that you eventually converted into being a number one guy, having been the third guy for so long and the kind of the forgotten guy. So there are so many examples. In Kenny Omega wasn't really converted completely to American wrestling, even though he was doing very good live numbers. His TV numbers didn't really convert to his title run. So you've managed to do so much with some of these talent. The women's division, we talked about it earlier. There wasn't a women's division when we started, really.
Nope.
There was Shida. That was about it, And then, obviously, they had a success with Britt. Whatever's going on there now. But she was up there as a rated success alongside Cassidy and Darby coming through in that group. And it shouldn't be forgotten. I think we're very, very quick to say all these things because we just look at AEW currently and we look at and we go, okay, yeah, so the live event business, and we'll talk a little bit about the residency in a minute, isn't where you want it to be.
No.
But what's going on there? Let's talk about it. But we forget that they sold 80,000 tickets for a stadium show and how insane that is. We forget that, they put 20,000 in Arthur Ashe and how insane that was. And you're doing gate after gate after gate when TNA couldn't get out of Orlando. And they have much more star power, if you think about it historically, than AEW ever have. This group and this achievement in terms of pay-per-view buys, in terms of TV revenue, in terms of live, is far beyond what anyone would have predicted 5 years ago.
Far beyond.
Far beyond.
Light years beyond.
And
it gets forgotten a little bit sometimes. And I
Yeah.
think, the last couple of months it's been forgotten. And I think it was, some of the tone of some of the 5-year stuff, it was like, Jesus Christ, like they're not going anywhere. like, just, because then you end up in a situation where this is where it gets the cycle is so fucking annoying, because then you have aggregators pick shit up and they pick it up out of context. And so you end up with a bunch of out of context quotes that don't make any sense that people get mad about. And then it's all back and forth. And it's just like, Jesus fucking Christ.
Look,
guys.
and if you're a WWE fan, you should be grateful for, one, that your wrestlers are all being paid more because of this company. Yep. Whether whether people would like kind of take shots at that, but hey, that's a huge change in our industry. That means everyone is benefiting. That's huge. And then WWE have improved. Post the Vince McMahon stuff, him going, they've had to put more focus on their product and actually think about it more. So if you're a WWE fan and you don't give a fuck about AEW, great, you've done better out of this. It's an open world now, and you can argue whether that's a great thing or not. Tanahashi going to a Forbidden Door restaurant ruined everything. I don't know, but we live in a world. We live in a world where he can just turn up on Collision and it's just accepted. That's crazy.
That's fucking crazy. I remember when Yuji Nagata showed up on that episode of Dynamite, right? Like that was
Kenta one. The Kenta one, which was like a shock, where we all like lost our minds after when he showed up with Kenny.
I think there's a lot of things like that just we take for granted, that it's like, we have this big, beautiful universe to play in. And I'm not saying everybody has to be happy all the time, because God knows we aren't.
It's cyclic, though. Wrestling is cyclic. And there will be things that you enjoy and there will be things you not enjoy. And sometimes that balance, or the people that are... A lot of that time it's to do with who's at the top of the card, right? So if you're really invested with who's on the top of the card or who's in the major chase stories, then, that will really help. If you're not, then it won't. And you will probably find things to find your arguments with, around that. That's not unusual. I can't think of a time where a wrestling company, the nearest is, you kind of got 4 or 5 years out of New Japan, 2015, 2014, 2019. But then that changes. It's cyclic. So it will take time. You give feedback, but it's like, if you need a break, take a break. But it's not like...
Take a break.
Jesus Christ,
There's so many people sometimes that I'm just like, it's okay for you to stop watching for a little while. You don't have to watch. You don't have to talk about it. It's all right. If you're not getting any enjoyment out of this, why fucking do it? Why fucking do it? Like, I get it. I understand the completionist mindset. We're all certainly guilty of that. But there are times where it's like, guys, you don't have to watch this. And like, realistically, like, some of this is, I think there's degrees to which, if you are a dude, you don't always understand how much media caters to you, and you can increase that percentage wise if you are straight or cis or white by like 20% for each one. And so like sometimes, like, if you have been catered to from a specific media for a long period of time, and then all of a sudden that media is not catering to you the way it used to, I imagine it can be very difficult for you to suddenly go, well, hey, they used to give me what I wanted, and now I only get that part of the time, so this sucks, right? Where maybe they're giving other people what they want some of the time.
It is a difficult one, because some of the changes were, some of the people are struggling now were singing along some of the changes. So when you look at the eras of AEW, you've got the kind of the first 6 months up to the pandemic, or maybe even the first 4 months, up to December, when the kind of the booking kind of all goes into Tony's hands. And then they got really lucky. I know our friend Peter is writing articles on the history of AEW, and he pointed out that if NXT had ran a show on that first day in 2020, everything might be different, because they ran unopposed and they were able to turn it around. They set off the Jericho program, they set off some of the tag programs, they set off so many big stories, Cody and MJF, and that really kind of changed the kind of pathway going forward. And then very shortly after, they get a TV deal, and then you've got building out to the pandemic. So probably one of the biggest things that pisses me off is this conception that everything turned when they brought in new people. No, they were so hot. They did so much work to get out that pandemic hot. They had the MJF Chris Jericho program. You had your big program, your Kenny Omega Hangman Page program, doing 20% plus quarters, doing huge houses, helping to sell out, Arthur Ashe, selling out All Out in literally the day after it went on. So they were hot. 0.5 ratings, so these people came in on that and they added to it. And then what we got is it started to change the kind of the audience and the construction. Yes. And it also changed how the company worked, and it changed kind of what it kind of promoted. So we did start to see more elements as we saw more WWE-minded people coming in. That was absolutely going to happen. But that was happening in 2022 spring. It it didn't suddenly turn up last year with MJF. Right. So we saw that change. One of my tailbacks is always to say, when people say, oh, you know, everything's changed, it's like, if you'd really gotten behind Adam Page as champion and his style of storytelling, would it be different? I think that's kind of an interesting thing to look at. But the fact is there are all these people with different kind of ways of storytelling, and they all get their opportunities. You know, Double or Nothing is very much a gimmick-heavy show, and has been now since its inception, really. You know, you think about even like a street fight. I think the first one had the Shida Nyla Rose, so that was a street fight. I recall somebody getting thrown on chips. And then I remember Moxley nearly going through the ramp and nearly smashing his head, actually, in the Brody Lee match. So there's always been these kind of gimmick elements to Double or Nothing. But then we've got Forbidden Door coming up, which is your crossover show with much more pure wrestling.
Right.
And then we'll have All In, which is your big showcase show, but then All Out last year was a pure wrestling show. So there's always these different elements, and then it's just kind of finding that rebalance on TV. But we're probably going to see that more with the Owen. You know, they'll have the Continental Classic coming up this year. So it's kind of offering something for everyone, and it's always been that kind of thing. And it just depends on how you see the construction of it and whether you kind of feel the cycles in and out. I don't really feel like the show's too much different. I think the only thing massively different is that we don't get enough of the top people in TV matches.
I think that's absolutely valid. I also think some of this comes from, you know, 5 years ago, people did not know what Tony Khan's rating or booking patterns were. Yeah. Right? You showed up, you watched the show, you were like, oh my God, this is incredible. You know, we've watched it for 5 years now. We understand the interference finishes. We get some of like, okay, this guy's going to get beat and beat and beat and beat and beat. And then he's going to get, this person is all elite and they'll win a few matches, right? We're going to get a lot of top guy versus like mid-card low guy who doesn't get a win. Right? You know, we've got a lot of predictable match finishes that if you probably went back in time knowing what you know now, but now about Tony's booking, you could probably predict the booking back then when it first started. Mm-hmm. But like, I think people get tired of that. And so there's that sense of, I don't feel what I felt when this show first started. The show must be bad, rather than I've just watched it a long time and I kind of know what's coming.
Yeah, there is a thing of that. I do think that it's harder to tell them stories week to week.
Yes.
Now, and I do think that I missed the focus on characters. Yes. In the way that we did have. We get bits and pieces, and we might get that, but that's something that, and it was always going to change. But yeah, I definitely think that's, and maybe that's just, but I always think that's something to do with kind of the way that I enjoy wrestling, and how like something like New Japan always with that kind of small crew always kind of appealed more to me because of that mindset. And sometimes you just got to accept some of that stuff, you know. But it does change, and I always think about as well is that we do so much talking about what's wrong with a product or what it's not doing well, and you know, before I actually said a good thing, actually, there is the biggest thing that I think I want them to look at going forward is the live experience. Yeah. So let's be honest, like for a long period of time now, since kind of late 2021, some of the shows that we put on the ground are not really acceptable for a live crowd. You have to reward the people that are most invested in you. And a way that you can keep someone's loyalty is to give them something in front of their eyes. So whether you go and you see a great match, or even you just go and you see everyone that you want to see. You know, you can't keep advertising people that aren't going to be there. But also, the company's more insular. You know, this is probably the big change. And WWE have actually figured it out quicker than they have currently. And that's quite... So when Nick Khan was talking about Saudi Arabia the other week, and he was talking about, maybe we can give them more of a festival. And if you think about these shows, these pay-per-view shows, what they do, and the reason why they can look at running Minneapolis for 2 nights and not worry too much about what's going on with a product, is they make it a destination. So you go to a pay-per-view, you can go and you can meet wrestlers, you can go to like big rallies like they did in Backlash in Lyon. You can go to all sorts of little spin-off events. There might be shows. It might be this. The idea is it becomes that thing of you have that experience. So actually that show and that content of that show isn't the most important thing because you're buying into that experience. It's what they do with WrestleMania. That's what WrestleMania week is. And AEW, and it's a way of getting loyalty, you know. So somebody meets somebody, I don't know. You know, we've seen it with one of our friends this week, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Met the Bucks. Probably something that's going to keep her loyal to, this product for a long time. Those things are important. And, this company was built off that. The indie wave that built this company was built on that. You used to get lines of Penta and Phoenix that used to go around the bend of any major venue. You have to kind of get back to building that relationship with your fans, because that's that thing. There's a cutoff point currently. And I think a lot of this kind of frustration comes from that, is that they don't feel like there's open communication in any way, because there's no way to. Like, there's no feedback between, other than you go to a show, you see a show, but you probably don't see the people that you wanted to see. And you've got to fix that. And then you've got to give them more.
When was the last time they did a fan fest? Right? They just did 2 days in Las Vegas. And the only thing that happened was, the only thing that happened was the Young Bucks did, thank God, a meet and greet about their shoe sales, which is great. And thank God they're doing more stuff. But like,
they figured it out.
That's one of the things where it's like, geez, even stupid stuff like moderation, right? You go to watch a premiere of like a countdown and you've got somebody in the comments spamming with like some of the worst shit you've ever seen, right? Like small stuff like that, like it can go a long way. And I think, if you're a wrestler, you're not getting that feedback because where's it coming from? And you're not seeing people who are engaging with you. You're just seeing the worst of the worst of the worst. Like, I think that's the kind of stuff, like you said, they've really lost their way on that. And it's really hurt their live experience. It's hurt their fan investment. It's really unfortunate because, like you said, like Cody Rhodes, again, he throws out that stupid
He's so
fucking
good
thing.
at it. Whether you like him or not, he's really, really good at that stuff.
Here's where I'm going to be. Here's where you will see me, right?
And he's there.
And he's there, and he knows because he's fucking told where he's going to be. Now, I'm not blaming the wrestlers for this, because I think with AEW, we've seen that sometimes, they're not always aware of where they're going to be, right?
And they're not always used in front of the crowd either. That's not
correct.
their choice,
Right. So, like, that's one of those things where it's like, WWE does a better job, right? Mm-hmm. Now, this is one of those things where, again, if we throw that and say, okay, we're getting rid of 50% of the people in AEW, you guys, how many fucking, the number of times I see people on the internet, they're like, so-and-so should lose their job. Like, fuck you. Like, you don't want to see them on TV. Say, I don't want to see them on TV. They should, Tony Khan should fucking fire half these people. Like, why? Who's it, your fucking money? Like, that just irritates, whatever. Side note, rant over, etc. Except for Billy Gunn.
Yeah. What is going on? What voodoo fucking thing does this guy have? He
won the fucking match. I didn't think we would ever see him in a goddamn AEW ring after that bullshit he pulled with Jay White. But now not only are we seeing him in the ring, he's fucking getting the pin. Whatever. Side note. Sorry. I just think I lost my train of thought. Billy Gunn derailed my train of thought, that motherfucker. I do think one of the things to be conscious of as we move into like this spring is that people are going to start moving, and it's been all one way so far, right? We've seen a lot of WWE to AEW movement, and we have not seen a lot of AEW to WWE movement. If you're smart and you're not necessarily happy with your spot on the card, and like you said, they brought a lot of people in, they're showing a lot of people, like you're looking to go to WWE if they'll take you. And WWE should be looking to take some of these people because quite frankly, their upper card is real old and kind of stale. Like if you look at their roster depth, it's not significant. Now that gives them the benefit of being able to highlight a relatively small amount of people and shove them down your throat week after week after week, and which is in many ways a very big positive. But the flip side of that is, they could use somebody to elevate. And if you're an AEW and you're sitting in the mid card, you just watched Okada and Ospreay and all the other people come in, and Max is back and everything else, you're thinking, hey, maybe I'm better off. And quite frankly, people should move around more, right? Mm-hmm. Whether you want WWE to be the product you watch, like it's better for everybody if the wrestlers have options and move around more. And I just feel like that's coming soon. Like I feel like there's going to be some people moving soon, and that there's going to. I'm not looking forward to the freak out.
Yeah, but it's just, that's natural. You can see that the top end is heavy. You see that they're going to have issues kind of keeping everybody happy. So it's natural. Right. And you go where the opportunity is, and where the best deal is. That's it at the end of the day, because this job is a livelihood.
Yes.
We use it as our hobby, it's our interest. But at the end of the day, to these people, it's their livelihood. So that's what's important to them. And, but this thing has given us, as fans, some great moments. I was going to ask you actually. I got 2 questions right for you. Here you go. Two unprepared that you didn't know about.
Oh God damn it! Shit.
So what is what is kind of your favourite moment from AEW? And then what's the kind of underrated moment that no one else would probably think about that you absolutely love?
You're such a bitch.
I'm a sneak, yes.
I feel like for underrated moments, and this is totally my own personal preference, for underrated moments, I probably would say that there is a Orange Cassidy versus JD Drake dark match. That was from one of the Battle of the Belts. It was a Battle of the Belts where Hangman didn't have a match, but he did a dark match. I think it was in Texas somewhere.
It's not. It's in Charlotte, North Carolina. It was.
I knew you would know what this was. You know, it was a trios match he was in. It was after he won the championship. Yeah, of course she knows.
It was the highest dark viewership of the year on YouTube.
Yeah, because it was a fucking good dark. But it was Orange Cassidy versus JD Drake, and it was just a perfectly executed comedy match that I just really liked. Like, in terms of just an underrated thing that makes me happy. And I am someone who just really enjoys a good comedy match. Like, I was thinking about this today because I was thinking about Copeland versus Malachi from last night, and how I enjoyed the Evil Uno's Mystery Wrestling had a pillow fight match that I enjoyed way more. It wasn't better, but I just enjoyed it so much more. And I was like, that's your preference. Like, at the end of the day, that's your preference comes into play with that kind of stuff more than anything else. But in terms of best moments, I don't know. Maybe Orange Cassidy losing the... there's a theme here, Trish. I don't know if you can pick up on it. Maybe Orange Cassidy losing the international title at the end of All Out to Jon Moxley. I just thought that match was perfect, and that moment was perfect, and I really, 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 really enjoyed that. All right, same question back to you, bitch.
That's not fair.
Yeah, guess what?
So, a couple of my favorite kind of thing that I've ever seen live is the tag match at Revolution 2020. I have never watched it back. I probably never will watch it back. It's my last memory before the pandemic, and it's just magic. And I remember not just what happened in the ring, but I remember the reactions of the people around us. Especially, there was a woman sat in the row ahead that had never seen a wrestling show before. Oh. And she was going insane. And it was just really special. And that will always sit with me as kind of, the one that maybe people expect. In terms of underrated moment, it's so stupid. But it is on your theme, actually. It's a Cassidy thing. And it's like the fun of some of the pandemic stuff. So it's when he covered Chris Jericho in orange juice. And they go to the and he's on commentary after, and they go to commercial break, and Tony says, like, we're doing this, we're doing that. Or Excalibur says this, and Jericho just goes, I'm covered in orange juice. And it's just, it just sits in my head. There's a Callous one at Double Nothing 2021 as well, where like Kenny's in trouble and he just runs down and he's like, shit, and like stuff like that. Like, that era was so much fun, and it needed to be, because it was, it was such a difficult time and such an uncertain time. So there was just like a joyfulness in that kind of content during that period of time in AEW. And yeah, that's probably the thing that sits in me. It's just a tiny little thing, but those things were, that's what made the era special. And that's why when people do look back, and people get really annoyed, don't we, when we go back and go, it's not to say that era was better, but it had an energy to it that they haven't been able to recover, and they won't be able to. It'll be different now, because the company grows, it gets bigger, and it changes. And there's been things that happen. I mean, you just can't have that kind of starting energy. No, but there was something to it.
I think that's like you said, that is inevitable, because everyone was in a very hyper elevated situation. The wrestlers were like the rest of us. They were stuck at home unless they were wrestling, and there's a sense of camaraderie, I think, that comes out of something like that, where these are the only people I'm seeing. I'm God only knows what's happening. I'm going to enjoy myself, and that's going to be difficult to sustain when you're on the road and you're not seeing people as much as you used to, and everybody's sort of doing their own thing. And like, I think even if CM Punk had been the greatest human being on earth and had been fully on board with the AEW mission, and that was an inevitable change that was coming regardless.
Sure. We talk about another. I'm not commenting on that. We're not doing it. I'm not getting in trouble. Okay. No more trouble this week. I've been good.
No, we're going to be good people.
Good, yeah. So, should we comment on another change that's happening upcoming in AEW with Collision? So, Collision is going on residency in Arlington.
Yeah. This was big news, yes.
Yeah, going to the Esports Stadium in Arlington from July the 20th to August the 17th. And that will also include separate Ring of Honor tapings as well. It seems to be, yes, from Tony seems to indicate that financially they are doing okay out of this. So likelihood is, I don't know if it would contain a site fee, but at least it would be like, I don't think that they're paying for this venue by the sound of it. And then you then have the cut down of not having to run things back and forth. Because I think the idea is that you stick all this equipment or most of the equipment you need for it there, and then you leave it there. So you are going to save an absolute fortune on transportation. And, you will need a much smaller group of stagehands as well, which is one of your major production costs. And then also, when it comes to your routing, it's much easier to route one thing for Dynamite than it is to route for Dynamite and Collision. And to find venues, because WWE block a lot of venues as well. You then got college sports. We were talking the other day about how busy arenas are.
Yeah. Underrated in the terms of conversation, and something we're not familiar enough to be able to say for sure, but anecdotal evidence would suggest that there's a lot more live events on the road this summer than there has been, and that may be impacting not just availability of venues, but also ticket prices and whether AEW is selling. But side note, like I said, we don't have enough on that.
No, but it's a thing about when they're trying to find venues to route it, and you're trying to route it as cheaply as you possibly can. Remember back in the fall and winter of 2022, they were running predominantly just the East Coast because it saved them millions in their horribly cold venue shows. When people want to talk about a down period, Jesus Christ, like we come back out of that one, didn't we? That was so. You got to think of it that way. The thing about with Collision is it makes an awful lot of sense because, as we talked about with live shows, some of the Collision offerings, they're fine when you turn on the TV. You can watch 2 hours, it goes by very quickly, but you aren't putting any of the stars on that show practically.
No.
You mean 1 or maybe 2 maximum. And when you're saying the AEW brand, people expect to see the people associated with it. And then you're putting on, and even at the start, they were putting on how many squash matches, you counted them all. So it wasn't a great live offering, and it quickly kind of diminished in terms of live offering as well. So, they opened at 9280 at United Center, which was, it was a good number. It wasn't what they probably expected when they were running United Center. And then you had the kind of the heavily papered, price-reduced Canadian tour, some of them which were house shows or Rampage tapings moved into it. So, you had the first 6, including the Newark show, which was originally booked for Death Before Dishonor. Yep. And that averaged kind of 5,724. And then the next 6, we saw really, really heavy discounting, lots of $15 tickets, lots of buy one, get one frees, that sort of thing. And it didn't really change all that much because every time they went into a different market that like Dynamite had already been in, they were losing an average of like 21% on the previous visit. So even though it's on a Saturday, so theoretically it should do better than Dynamite, but it was always struggling and was having to resort to a lower price point. And one thing that we've seen, people talk about ticket sales since November, is since the kind of the changeover in the running of live events, we're not seeing the huge discounting now.
No.
We're seeing cheaper tickets where in the markets where you need cheaper tickets, but we're seeing them much more in line with kind of everyone else, and we're not just throwing money at price reductions to kind of throw people through the door. And it's great in terms of perception. You get people in. We talked Washington DC last year, 5,300. 2,000 of them are comps, half of them are cheap. So you've kind of got to rebuild the value of your ticket price, and that comes 2 ways. So you need to be offering a great live offering. You need to be advertising who's actually going to be there, and they need to be there. But also, you've got to kind of reestablish what your brand is worth to the consumer. And some of them you might have burnt because you might have got them to buy $200 tickets, and the person next to them turns up for $20.
Right.
And that was constantly an issue last summer. And so it kind of makes sense to move that into this and try this out and see how it works. And it should. I keep hearing people saying it won't make any difference to Dynamite numbers, but think of some of the towns that they've ran where it could have made a huge difference to kind of the averages. So, they ran Calgary last year, they're running that for a Dynamite this year. Greensboro, North Carolina, big market for them, as we've seen with Revolution. That was run for a Collision. Cleveland, San Antonio, Garland, Curtis Caldwell, my favourite map. Curtis Caldwell, I love that map. Charlotte, North Carolina, Vancouver, which just close to 7,000. You think about that in the Dynamite average, how that looks different. Or people look at it differently. Portland, Oregon, they did 2 stops, 2 shows in Montreal. If that's only one, does that look different? We aren't running shows in Palm Desert, Council Bluffs, and Youngstown, which we've got coming up. How can you expect big numbers from places like that? You can't. And that says to me that they're trying to find too many places and they're just unable to. So it just makes sense to kind of restructure, see how it goes. From a financial standpoint, it's much, much better for them. And it also means they've got to work as live event sales. They've got to kind of, as promoters, they've got to do a local market promotion across 6 weeks, where it's going to get much, much more difficult in weeks 4, 5, and 6. The first week, I think they're going up against the Jake Paul fight across the road at the near enough across the road at the AT&T Stadium in Arlington. They'll have baseball games up against, but bring in your luchadors if you can. Promote that in the local press, Dallas Morning News, wherever. Bring in the Von Erichs. Do these sort of things. Maybe bring down some of your headliners that don't normally appear on Collision just to do meet and greets. Hey, what about that? Get stuff doing with you in an esports place. Is there gaming? Is there anybody that can do anything with gaming with you?
Nobody in AEW plays video games, so...
Yeah. Is there any, I don't know the stream. I have friends that know the streaming world. I do not know the streaming world. But I'm sure there's people that can get involved and you can turn it into something else of benefit to you. So kind of really use that to kind of think about your live operation and what you can do better going forward. So actually it should really help them to have that as a trial to see how they go. But I don't see the problem with taking Collision kind of off the road because it's an acknowledgement of where they are with it. And
yes. Well, that's the biggest thing, right? This is not if Collision was selling 4,000 or 5,000 tickets a night, this would not be happening. Mm-hmm. And we know that, and I'm not trying to downplay it or say that's not the case. When I say this is a good thing, it's because we have way too often with AEW seen something not working and them consistently doing that thing that isn't working over and over and over again. Right? Mm-hmm. And this is a situation in which they're thinking outside the box. They're saying, hey, how can we change this? How can we fix this up? Like you said, they're going to do a better job. The Dynamites will do a better job. Like having a little bit less availability might make it a little bit more of something that people are willing to spend money on when it does come back on the road. And I think it's clear that, again, I'm not a big fan of using taxpayer money to supplement private corporations. But if it's out there, and that's an availability for them, then they should take advantage of it, right? So why not? The city has this venue that they're having a difficult time filling. Go for it. I just think that I'm more, like you said, I'm more optimistic that this will give them an opportunity to change up some stuff and try some things that are different. And the fan interaction is a huge one. And that more than anything else is going to provide value here, right? And you're in a major metro, so your travel costs will be slightly different because you're not trying to schlep everybody to Palm Springs.
Oh yeah, it's much easier to get in and out of of the metroplex area, isn't it? It's a huge airport there. It's well linked. It's probably one of the most connected airports in America. So, DFW. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then also it's a case of make Dynamite your star touring show. Everybody needs to be on them cards every week. And, if that means that other people are kind of only flown in to, do these Texas shows, well, that makes them more exclusive as well. So you have to prioritize these things. And your fan base wants to see all these people. You say you're the best wrestler. They want to see the best. Right. That doesn't mean they don't want to see, I'm not going to put names on people. It's not fair. But it doesn't want to see some of the other talent. But mix them in and out. But they need to see the people that they're paying for. And that gives you that idea to do that with Dynamite and not have to split them off onto Collision or try and do 2 kind of travel cycles. Yeah. And the other big thing was, mentioned it right at the start of this bit, was Ring of Honor is going to be separate. So we got a question from Lamora on Twitter that said they just want our thoughts on the RH purchase revival, which did it end up hurting or helping AEW? There was a thread on the, I'm going to read this, there's a thread on the F4W board, and it seems like a lot of people think that the purchase hurt AEW's creative. What do we think?
I mean, I think it's hard to let me say this. I don't know that it hurt AEW's creative. In some ways, yes. I'd probably hedge more on that than I would on anything else. I think it's hurt their brand value. I think it's hurt from a bunch of perspectives, right? Because you've got, I've talked about this. I don't think the too many belts argument would be as significant if there weren't the ROH belts on TV all the time. And on TV on people who don't ever win, right? So
how meaningful is a belt if the people
how
who
meaningful
have
is a
belts
belt?
don't win?
As John Moxley says, everybody has one, right? They're like catchphrases. I think at the time, and I remember this so vividly, I remember after the announcement and listening to the Wrestling Observer Radio the next morning and Dave being like, this is a huge mistake. You've devalued your own brand. And I was like, geez, he seems very cranky about this. And he was 100% correct. There's nothing that they gained in Ring of Honor that wasn't more valuable to them if it had the AEW name attached to it, right? Yeah. And I think in terms of the live experience, it's possible that if they'd been able to run this as a completely separate show in a completely different venue, then it would have absolutely maybe had less of an impact. But the way that it's been integrated with their live events, and especially with Collision, it's been a huge detriment in a way that Dark and Dark Elevation never were. Because your big stars never work used to work Dark and Dark Elevation, but they never work Ring of Honor, or they work it very, very rarely. And as a result, you end up with a live experience where at the end of it, people are, you got to sit for 3 hours to watch a bunch of dark, essentially less than dark matches because your top stars aren't going to be in them. So why am I sticking around?
Yeah, no, it's a poor finish to the live experience, whereas when we had Dark, they ran before. You could have 17 matches. I think I always bring up the 28th or the 7th, the show in Charlotte, North Carolina, the famous one with the 5-on-5 elimination and the Chris Jericho pizza cutter. Now I'm in trouble. But that had 17 matches beforehand. And they involved, by the end, by the time you get your crowd and you had your top talent kind of who weren't on that show, like Moxley and and people like that. And then it didn't have any effect on the atmosphere for that show. In fact, it ended on that high note and they all went home happy. And you kind of have to look at separating that, because it's just, you walking out and there's like a few hundred going, like that doesn't help anybody. And then time you've got, we had times last year after the end of Collision, you've got Orange Cassidy coming out and there's like 600 people left at the end.
Right.
Like, it
doesn't make him look important either. And he's somebody that you want to promote as a star.
I was not really big on it. And I think they used it as a crutch to fill quarters that nobody wanted to work that first summer in 2022. If you have a look at the playoffs in May, you'll see a lot of kind of Ring of Honor style main events at the end of things, because nobody wanted to take the tough quarters, and I think that's a shame. So they use it as a crutch, and I think it has been used as a crutch. I think they did have ambition to kind of make it into a TV product. I don't know if that same ambition is there. I think we've seen a couple of runs of it with the Chris Jericho title run, and then last year when they put the belts on to Eddie and Adam Cole and Max and the Bucks and Hangman, but that kind of swiftly dissipated. So and I think if you don't get it a TV home at this point, turn it into developmental, do something else with it. But I don't see the value of it as a touring brand at all.
No,
that sounds harsh, but it's a library. It's not Ring of Honor. It's not Ring of Honor. And I watch Ring of Honor for donkey's years. It's not Ring of Honor. What it is just a side AEW thing without the name, and it's not got the fun liveliness sometimes of Dark either. So, I'm not a fan of it. I know they've had some good shows, but a lot of them have just been AEW talent shows.
Yeah. So. Well, the pay-per-views, I think, have been better in some instances. And you've obviously gotten, it gave somebody like Athena a great opportunity. But at this point, Athena should be on AEW TV. Mm-hmm. Yes. I don't think she's proved herself over and over and over and over again. Right. So, if you want to create this, if you want to still keep it, then like you said, make it a developmental property, send it someplace and let them tape down there. And it should not be part of your live experience anymore. It's just it's not working. It was a good effort. You tried something different. It's okay. Sometimes things don't work.
That's it.
It's not the end of the world.
A couple of final AEW questions, just before I forget, because I am rubbish at keeping up with the questions, don't I?
I just throw them in the document and send them to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Question from Frankie on the Discord. So why don't brands recognise the value in wrestling fans? I feel like there are people who will buy almost anything if you slap a popular wrestler on it. Even WWE seem to have issues with actually tying in with other brands.
I don't know that I have the expertise to even answer this question. I think some of it has to do with the perspective of wrestling fans and what they are. And I think we saw this with Fox and SmackDown and the ad revenue, which was never where Fox wanted it to be. I think WWE is doing their best to do tie-ins with brands wherever they can. But I think it's still an uphill struggle for a lot of reasons,
Yeah.
And having WWE be the standard bearer of what people know of wrestling, and Vince McMahon being probably the first name that comes to people's minds when it comes to wrestling, is not great for the way it looks to other people.
Yeah, no, that's that probably covers it. Yeah, from my perspective. And the other one was Chris on Twitter asks, is it more important to have the first 30 minutes of the show on AEW Dynamite uninterrupted, or more important to have the last 30 minutes of the show uninterrupted? So I'll do this one.
I was going to say, this is a you question all day.
So what AEW do, and if you can look through the patterns, is they try and have kind of 30 minutes or so uninterrupted screen time as much as possible. So in the winter especially, they'll try and do that at the start of the show. And normally what I'll mean is they'll have maybe a quarter with no ad break, or a quarter with just picture-in-picture. And then the second quarter will be same thing, either no ad break or just picture-in-picture, or the ad break, the full ad break will be right at the very end of the quarter. So they've done kind of 28, 29 minutes without having any kind of interruption to the full screen. And that full screen ad break's really important, because sometimes you'll look at it and you'll see, a double quarter Q2 and you'll think, oh my God, like that Q3 is horrendous. But what happens is that that's where you lose kind of anyone you've retained from your lead in outside the first couple of minutes and your first bit of interest. So that's the one that will get hurt. So we often see people like Orange Cassidy, Chris Jericho, the Bucks, who are put in Q3 to kind of stop that bleeding, so you don't get that 23% RVD quarter or anything like that. So that is kind of a job role there. So they like having that first half an hour. In the summer, that'll move, and you'll see a no ad break quarter often in the middle in Q4 or Q5, and you'll see another one with one picture-in-picture, or an ad break right at the start of, say, Q4 and then going through. And then you'll see maybe 2 ad breaks in Q6, and anyone that's in Q6 is dead, and apparently a ratings failure. So this is how it works. And at the end of the show...
Count the ad breaks.
Yeah, count the ad breaks. And at the end of the show currently, we're seeing a lot of kind of no ad break quarters, because they're going into overruns, because they're trying to really push the value of this third hour. So we saw that with the Kenny Omega segment on that Q9, if you want to call it. Now 11-minute overrun, 4 minutes on Rampage, no ad break. So they're using it for different things. Traditionally, I'd say that they try and do kind of long periods of uninterrupted without full ad breaks, but that one at the start in the winter is the most important, and in the summer it would be in the middle of the show, not at the end. The only other thing I wanted to talk about was Dominion's coming up in a couple of weeks. Hot topic. And just like the Owen Hart Cup, the main event was planned out a little bit in advance. I know everyone likes to think they copy WWE on that, so that's kind of funny, because we've known about that for a little while. But yeah, the main event of Dominion will be the Best of Super Junior final. Most people are presuming, because of that being the final and the star power, that we might get another Hiromu Takahashi match with Desperado, which makes sense, because Desperado has never won Best of Super Juniors, and that would be kind of a big moment for him to do so. But it is the first time the World Championship hasn't main evented a show that it's been defended on since Naito's famous being voted out the main event at Wrestle Kingdom. So, making me angry just thinking about that. But there we are.
It's your special guy.
Yeah, that is my special guy.
That's your special guy.
That literally is. But yeah, it's that thing. So there's been a lot of talk about it. People kind of blamed it on a fan vote, but it was kind of long, the plan. In fact, it was a plan for so long that's why we thought Moxley wasn't going to be defending, because we knew that this match had been moved from having its own standard kind of final show to that. So we have Jon Moxley and Evil as the world title match. And I think the question I want to ask is, there are some people that suspect that Evil may pick the belt up from Moxley there. And I guess it's that thing of, if that happens, would it be the right time? Or is Forbidden Door the right time? Because there's that question of, how long do you go with this now? And is it helping either side?
Well, that's my question to you, Trish. As someone who definitely pays more attention to New Japan than I do days in and out. Do you think that the Moxley IWGP Championship experiment has worked the way New Japan wanted it to?
I actually think this is twofold. So when this was kind of planned out was back in January. You know, we'd had kind of knowledge of the match before it was announced for Windy City Riot, and then I went back and I checked. I mentioned this with the Jack Perry thing, is that we kind of knew that Moxley was going to pick the belt up. And I think AEW thought with the new arrivals it was the right time to do it, and they wouldn't miss Moxley as much as they did. And they did. And I think they realised it, which is why he's kind of been shoehorned in and out. But for AEW, there's no real benefit of shoehorning him in and out like they are doing currently.
No, without advertising him, he's not going to help you.
Yeah, so you've got to look at that as, for this period of time, it's fine, but I don't think it can go on much longer. You need Moxley back in the fold, especially with all the people coming back in and out, and for ratings, obviously. And also, I don't think it helps them to have a second world title on that show, on a bigger star than their world title was on. And that's not disrespecting Swerve. That's just what he's having to compete with. You know, it's making his life more difficult that there's someone else being called a world champion who is much more recognised than he is. So that would benefit them as well. From New Japan, so in a way, yes. So in terms of house numbers, absolutely. You know, the Naito match at Windy City Riot was massive. It was their biggest live gate individually, you know, without Ring of Honor's MSG show since Long Beach with Cody and Kenny Omega. So that was huge. You know, the Ontario show was up a few hundred from the Resurgence show the year before with Ospreay and Tanahashi. And then Dontaku is a hard number to gather because it's a couple hundred down from Sonata and Hiromu last year, but this was a 2-day event this time rather than a single night. And it's so hard because Fukuoka, they've run the baseball, the ballpark there a couple of years ago in COVID, and then you're kind of getting back into pre-COVID numbers to try and judge it, and it's just impossible. So you'd say it's a pretty good number. You know, we'll see what Dominion does. But in terms of the big events, you know, he's delivered, especially in America where they wanted him to. Hopefully it's helped them with pay-per-view buys and subscriptions, because I think that was a large part of it as well. I think the hard part is that they need a champion for the G1. I don't think they can run without a IWGP heavyweight champion for the G1. And when you look at the Road to Dontaku numbers, you know, that tour struggled without having its champion. Yeah. And they saw this in 2021. They really struggled with Jay White not really being around, being in and out. 2022, sorry. Oh my God, I'm putting years on him. 2022, you know, that winter, they really struggled, and then the house show numbers really fell down. And there isn't huge American opportunities post Forbidden Door. You know, they go back to doing a Washington show and the normal kind of route that they do for live events come the autumn to fall, but there's nothing of the kind of level of Wintrust. So do you need a Moxley for them? Maybe, but you don't need him as champion, but you do need a champion for the G1. You know, that's a huge draw in that aspect, and I don't think they can go out without that this year. So then you have a decision to make. And my thought at the beginning of this was, once they kind of beat Naito, he was talking about, you know, he comes and raids my house, and I feel like, and I always made me feel like, okay, so there's the rematch at Forbidden Door, and then maybe even a third match in Adachi, because they were saying he was booked for the Soul Tour. So you could do that if you absolutely wanted to. So I always thought it was going to be a trilogy, but I could absolutely see them doing, you know, Naito and Moxley again for Forbidden Door. It's the biggest match you could do, probably, for that card. Whether anyone likes it or not, it still is. And, you know, Zach seems to be kind of moving away and aiming towards the G1, so maybe that's not happening. But yeah, I think it's worked for New Japan's aims. It's given, you know, some experience for some of their younger wrestlers with a different guy at the top who's more mobile than what Tetsuya Naito is or Tanahashi is, poor guy with no knees. Bless him. Like, I'm never going to be angry at Tanahashi. Like, all these people saying about how long it took him to climb turnbuckle. I don't care. He's Tanahashi. Go away. But it's, you know, these guys need someone else to work with to help develop them, and it gives Naito a break, quite frankly, from having to carry that company domestically. But I don't see how it can continue post Forbidden Door or Adachi the week later. Yeah. Yeah.
It will be interesting to see how they set up Forbidden Door this year, and how they set up, how they integrate the CMLL guys into it.
Yeah, I will definitely see some of them on Wednesday, I'm sure. So.
Yeah.
But it will be quite funny if Evil wins and then it's Evil title, won't it? Oh my god.
People will just...
They're gonna. It's just gonna be horrendous, isn't it? You can just team with Jack Perry and like, it'd just be great.
Oh, I shouldn't laugh.
It would be funny. It would be so good. Like, no, it wouldn't, but it kind of would. There's a part of me. There's a part of LAJ part of me that thinks it would be absolutely fucking hilarious and kind of wants to see it, to be honest. But
listen, sometimes you just want to root for chaos.
Yes.
In this case, not the faction, but you know what I'm talking about.
No, I've never rooted for chaos in my life.
No. Does anyone?
No one buys their merch either. Have you seen it? No. Why is there still not a good Okada shirt? Come on now, it's been 10 years. Somebody make one. It's brutal. It's always brutal.
The saddest part about Best Friends breaking up is John Freeze not having as much merch, possibly. Like, Best Friends had some of the best merch.
Somebody get him onto Okada. Like, Okada needs a good shirt. Like, it's never happened.
An Okada cartoon shirt would be incredible.
Yeah, as opposed to his normal... Who designs him? Come on, Okada, sort yourself out. Bucks, sort him out. Like, sort him out.
Yeah,
like, somebody help that man get some good merch. So no, that's about it. So the next time we'll be back will be after Dominion, actually. So hopefully we have chaos. Let's see. I'm going to get my evil scepter out and use it as like a charm, I think. It's not come out of the office in 5 years. Oh, God. Right. On that note... this has been the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast. We are proud members of the Social Suplex Network alongside One Nation Radio, keeping it strong style, all things elite, Imps WWE Adventure, Wrestling Art with Chris Fings, and the incredible Tunnel Talk, home of producer Leah, who does a stunning job putting this all together, even at very much short notice and while travelling this week. So thank you once again. You can find us over on Twitter. So that so much British accent there. At Trish and Sarah individually at Trish Spears 48 or at Sarah Graps. You can also email us at trishandsarahpod@gmail.com. You know, we've covered a number of topics in recent weeks involving the wrestling media, and whilst we do not need to contact individuals to relay public behaviour or the impacts of it, we are very much in favour of the right to apply, especially in this this very much politics month now we have an election in the UK, Sarah.
Yes.
Yes. Get the D-room ready. If anyone has any comments on our content or wants to request any corrections, it's easy enough to contact us. We very much believe that our work stands for itself and always aim to provide our listeners with as much support and evidence as absolutely possible. We appreciate all your feedback. We get sent things from all over the place, whether it be places like the board, on Val, or anywhere else. We read it. We do take it on board. I don't shout as much. Have you noticed? Yeah.
I'm still shouting a lot. I'm sorry.
You're still shouting. It's all good.
I don't think I could stop myself even if I tried.
I'm. By the way, I'm not kidding. I'm not muting myself. It did make me smile. You can also talk to us directly on the Social Suplex Discord. Yeah, come join the conversation, ask any questions you have, or help Tay Overy work on getting Sarah to watch TJPW shows. We may get there in the end. Who knows? Until next time, I've been Trish.
I've been Sarah.
And this has been the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast.
Everyone knows therapy is great for solving problems, but getting therapy has its own problems too, like finding the right therapist, fitting into their schedule, and of course, the cost. Well, BetterHelp can solve those problems. It's totally online and built around your schedule. It's surprisingly affordable, too. Connect with a credentialed therapist by phone, video, or online chat, all from the comfort of your home. Visit BetterHelp.com to learn more and save 10% on your first month. That's BetterHelp, H-E-L-P.